Hello, and welcome to another episode of Unworthy History. Here on this channel, we try to bring you actual history that you can't find on some other channels. And today I'm going to bring you another story from this book right here, Indian Depredations in Texas by J.W. Wilbarger, published all the way back in 1889. So this story is similar to a recent story I did on Wil Willis. This takes place in the same county, Hamilton County, just a little bit later. So the attack on Wil Willis took place on Christmas Eve, 1866. This attack that we're going to read about today, which occurred against a schoolhouse, it took place in July of 1867. It's a story of Miss Whitney, who was the schoolhouse teacher on that day. At about 2 p.m. Thursday, July 11th, 1867, Miss Whitney was at a small log schoolhouse where she was teaching school in Hamilton County, situated upon the brink of the south bank of the Leon River. A beautiful valley 3/4 of a mile wide and 1.5 miles long spread out in front, free from every obstacle to the sight. This was called Warleen Valley. The Howards lived 1 mile west and John Baggett 1/2 mile east of the schoolhouse. The town of Hamilton is 6 miles southwest of the schoolhouse. The logs of this schoolhouse, of which it was built, were unhewn, as was the custom in those days, and the spaces between were left open so that it was an easy matter for parties outside to fire through them upon the inmates. There was a small window cut out in the north side and was without a shutter. Olivia, the 12-year-old daughter of John Barbie, a stockman who lived northeast some 10 or 12 miles, was boarding in the neighborhood and attended the school. Her father was expected to come by that week to see her while out cow hunting. On the day and about the hour above named, a daughter of Alex Powers was about the door, which was in the south side of the schoolhouse overlooking the valley. While there, she saw a party of men on horseback rapidly approaching, and soon became satisfied that they were Indians. Miss Whitney, seeing her standing at the door and gazing so intently, asked her what she saw. She replied she was looking at some persons in the valley who were coming towards the schoolhouse, and that she believed that they were Indians. Miss Whitney bade her take her seat, telling her not to be so foolish, as the men were cow hunters. She believed it was Mr. Barbie, and did not take the trouble to see for herself. Fatal error! Mr. Powers' daughter was still uneasy, and soon took another look, when she cried out, "They are Indians!" and took her little brother by the hands, and made good their escape through the window. This induced Miss Whitney to go to the door, and immediately told the children that they were Indians, and that they were taking Mary. Mary was the name of a fine saddle animal, the property and pet of the lady. She often made the remark, "If the Indians ever take Mary, I want them to take me too." When she became satisfied who the men were, she shut the door and told the children to escape by the window, which all did, except for Mary Jane, a daughter of Ezekiel Manning, who was sick, and 2 sons of James M. Kuykendall. Miss Whitney was very large and fleshy, weighing about 230 pounds, and could neither get out of the window nor hope to escape by running out at the door. Many of the children crawled under the house, and thus became unwilling witnesses of the tragedy that soon took place. In a few minutes the Indians had surrounded the house, and one, who seemed like the leader, said to Miss Whitney in fair English, "We have got you now." She read her doom in the hideously painted faces and bloodthirsty looks and menaces of the Indian foe. This heroic woman never lost her presence of mind, and desiring to save the lives of the children committed to her care, she implored the Indian who had addressed her in English to kill her if that would satisfy them, but to not harm the little ones. Whereupon the Indian held up 3 fingers to his comrades, and they began shooting the poor defenseless woman with their arrows, aiming through the chinks in the boards. Little Mary Jane Manning clung to the skirts of her beloved teacher, whose life-blood soon began to gush from her cruel wounds, and to pour over the floor and upon those beneath, and the fear-stricken child that clung to her so resolutely. She walked from side to side of this, her prison of death. marking her footsteps with screams and pools of blood, all the while pleading with the ruthless Indians to spare the lives of the little children, a spectacle which should have softened the obdurate hearts even of these devils incarnate. She finally succeeded in getting the two girls, Mannings and Kuykendalls, to get out of the window, and while doing so, an arrow was buried in the back of Miss Kuykendall, inflicting a severe but not fatal wound to the little girl. This left Miss Whitney and the two Kuykendall boys in the house, and about this time the Indians succeeded in bursting the door open, and an Indian entered to complete the foul murder, but too late to do further harm. The last gasp was given, the last quiver shook the straightening limbs, and a tortured soul was loosed to angels as her hellish enemy crossed the threshold of the doorway. On perceiving that their victim was dead, the Indian who had entered called to someone outside, whereupon the English-speaking Indian entered and asked the two boys if they wanted to go with them. One, in fright, said yes, and the other said no. He took the other and put him on a horse and took him away with them. This was John Kuykendall, who subsequently was purchased from the Indians and sent home. At the time, the Indian who had entered the house called on the one outside. The latter had about succeeded in getting Olivia Barbie up behind him on a horse. This call saved her from a barbarous and perhaps shameful captivity. She immediately fled and was afterwards found by Josiah Massengill. She had received such a fright and was so terror-stricken that she was wild, and it became necessary to run her down to secure her, which was not till the succeeding day. Miss Whitney was not scalped, nor were any of the children killed that day. Other things were transpiring nearby, and so rapidly that in the opinion of the writer had more to do in saving the children from slaughter or captivity than the entreaty of this poor schoolmistress. At about the time of the attack on the schoolhouse, two ladies, Miss Amanda Howard and her brothers Volney Howard's wife, Sarah, rode into the valley from the south, and some nearer John Baggett's on the east than to their home on the west. Miss Amanda, who is a fearless rider, was gentling a young horse for her own use, and her sister-in-law was only keeping her company. They saw the Indians at the schoolhouse and at first took them to be cow hunters. They were discovered by the Indians before they had ridden far up the valley, and two of the party rode to meet them. The ladies soon discovered their mistake and turned to run to Baggett's house, and the Indians, seeing this, gave hot pursuit. Miss Amanda had some difficulty in turning and starting her young horse. When, however, she did get him whipped into a run, a glance over her shoulder showed the foremost Indian to be so close that she looked into his gleaming and gloating eyes. She dashed away from her pursuers, and heading straight for Baggett's fence, determined to try her horse at a leap, and with this purpose she lashed him into furious strides. The horse cleared the fence at a single bound. Mrs. Sarah Howard did not fare so well. Her horse shied and suddenly turned to one side to be caught by an Indian, while Mrs. Howard was thrown headlong over the fence. So great was her momentum. Being unhurt, she quickly also escaped to Mr. Baggett's. While Miss Whitney was being murdered at the schoolhouse and Miss Howard and Mrs. Howard were being chased east of it, a mover, Mr. Strangeline, had entered at the west end of the valley at the Howard place, and had proceeded to about halfway across the valley when he was attacked by some of the Indians as they were leaving. Mr. Strangeline was killed, but he was not scalped. They shot but did not kill Mrs. Strangeline, a little girl, and the baby. About this time, the brave Miss Amanda Howard, seeing what was going on, formed the bold design of escaping from the valley and warning the settlers. To do this, she would have had to ride obliquely in the direction of the Indians, and then outride them in getting to the only road that crossed the high hill to the south and led to the lower settlements. She was cut off from those above. Her plans matured. She mounted her half-wild steed and commenced the perilous ride. Dashing at the fence, she again cleared it handsomely, and with whip and rein put her steed at his best. She was well started before her design became apparent to the enemy, when, with a yell, well calculated to strike dismay to the stoutest heart, the band left off the attack upon the Strangeline family, and being joined by those still lingering around the schoolhouse, they all rushed pell-mell to cut off Miss Howard from the road. Here again was the heroism of woman severely tried on this day of murder, rapine, and blood. Picture, if you can, reader, a woman surrounded by hideously fiendish-looking foes, thirsting and panting for her blood, she begging to be killed if that would save innocent childhood. And again, a woman riding into the very jaws of death, depending alone upon her skill in managing an unbroken horse, not bridle-wise, and the speed she may be able to get from him to carry the news of the presence of Indian foes to distant settlements. Thank heaven Miss Howard escaped by a few rods, and the cowardly foe hurriedly turned westward and left the valley, carrying the Kuykendall boy with them. The daring of Miss Howard, scarcely 17 at the time, no doubt saved many lives that day. She it was who attracted and withdrew the attention of the merciless Indian from the work of blood, and warned him that with his longer delay would certainly come retribution for this day's hellish work. She passed Manning's and Powers, stopping at the fence only long enough to tell them that the schoolhouse had been attacked by Indians. What awful tidings to parents, who only a few hours before had kissed rosy lips goodbye, which for aught they knew were silent in death, or worse still, captives. Miss Amanda rode rapidly on to Mr. Hendricks, who immediately sent his son, Abe, to the Pierson ranch for the bloodhounds. When Abe Hendricks reached the Pierson ranch, the eldest son, J.G.W. Pierson, was east of the Leon River in company with Chap and Volney Howard. They gathered up a crowd of 7 men in all and stopped at Manning's long enough to get information as to the direction taken by the Indians. They got upon a trail at about 11 o'clock p.m. It was difficult to get off in good style, for at the west end of the valley, the way the Indians had left, it was very brushy and rocky, and the enemy had scattered, apparently every fellow looking out for himself. Young Kuykendall says he saw the pursuing party about sunrise, when the Indians took to the chaparral and scattered, one Indian leading his horse to which he was tied, from which he was not permitted to dismount for the next 2 days and nights, and when he did, the skin peeled from his legs. As well as he could tell, the Indians were some 6 or 7 miles ahead of the pursuers when the Indians took to the mountains and chaparral. So that's the end of this story right here. It's a little bit longer than most of the stories in this excellent book that I've been reading these from. So this was another one from Hamilton County. It's a story that's pretty well known to those who I think live around that area. So if you want to hear more stories like this, then be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you back here next time on Unworthy History.